Well, getting your kids to look up from their electronics is getting tougher than ever. Children are glued to their tablets, cell phones, and spending less quality time with their families. Parents are guilty of much of the same. So how do you end and turn the tide on digital distraction in your home? Parenting expert and author Gigi Schweikert is here with some tips on how to reclaim your family and turn the focus back on each other. Welcome.
Welcome to you. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much.
We're glad to have you here. So we're going to talk about the phones and all of this stuff that really is affecting family life today like never before. How is it negatively impacting relationships in the family?
Well, it's very interesting. You have to think about those digital devices. And as a parent, can you really balance a child in one hand and a digital device in the other? And unfortunately, the answer is no. So as much as it feels like we're more connected than ever, in fact, on the surface we may be, but underneath we're not.
And when you're not, what are the negative implications?
There are a lot of negative implications. Now, one of the things that's interesting is the current research on screen time is really based on what's been happening with television. So it doesn't really include cell phones, iPads, those kinds of things. But what we know that is not good for children is, one, parents and children aren't having conversations together. Two, children aren't as physically active as they used to be. And lastly, is children learn most hands-on, and digital is visual.
I can't imagine growing up with this stuff. I personally can't. You have some tips we're going to start with for parents because, as you said, a lot of moms especially have the kid in one hand, the device in the other. What are some things that parents can keep in mind throughout the day?
Well, I'm going to suggest 4 things. I'm going to suggest turn it off, which is going to be super hard. I'm going to suggest tuck it away. I'm going to suggest talk it up.
Which means what? Talk it up.
Talk it up means, and I'll go back and talk about all of them, but talk it up means have conversations with your children. And the last one is going to be turn it back on. If you have a set time that you know you're turning it off and you're tucking it away, then you're going to be able to know that at 9 o'clock when everybody's tucked into bed, I'm going to pull that device back out.
What about the mom who's watching who says, you know, my other kids might call me, it might be an emergency. How do I do that?
Well, you can tuck it away, but just like you said, you didn't grow up with these devices, and I didn't grow up with these devices, and we were actually fine. So there's a little bit of us knowing where everyone is every single second. We plan a little bit ahead. We won't have to be on the phone all the time.
And you'll have a little less anxiety. Okay,
exactly.
So we have tips for toddlers. It amazes me when I see a toddler with a phone in a stroller. We actually have to have tips for toddlers today. So what are some of the tips?
What's interesting is the American Academy of Pediatrics suggests that toddlers don't even use screens.
That's what I was going to say. What is that?
For 2 and under, but we know that's happening. So let me tell you what some of those tips for toddlers are. One is that we don't want to use that as a pacifier or a bribe. We want to make sure that we offer those children toys or books, things that are interactive that they can use. We want to make sure that toddlers get that chance to be creative and do the things that toddlers need to do.
They shouldn't even have the phone to begin with.
They really shouldn't, but you know what? As a parent of 4, I have to admit, sometimes we do that. So don't feel too guilty if that's what's happening.
Okay, and for tweens, because now the kids are taking them to school, what are the tips for tweens?
So here's what we're going to talk about with tweens. We're going to make sure that those tweens, we have parental controls on their devices, that we use them in areas where we can see them, and we're going to have stop and start times. It's awesome for your child to understand that there's a time that you can use it and a time you can't.
And the same thing as you said for the toddlers, don't use them as a bribe.
Well,
not a pacifier. Not a pacifier, of course, for a tween.
Although in a way it could be a pacifier for a tween, because often when we're dealing with tweens and they're starting those hormonal issues, we want to pacify them in any way possible. And lots of times what parents like to do is hand over a device.
Right, and tweens is the ages of what, for people who don't know?
So tweens used to be 10 to 12. Today, it's anywhere from 8 to 12.
Starting earlier and earlier. Okay, and last but not least, teenagers.
Teenagers are tough. Last year, I had 4 teenagers in my home, so I'm an expert on that. Exactly. So the word's still out on teenagers and using those mobile devices as whether it's a good thing or a not so good thing. But what we want to do is make sure we teach them social etiquette. We want to make sure that they have a high self-esteem. They're always comparing themselves to people on Facebook Facebook. And we know those are our very best pictures. And we want to make sure that they have some time where they tuck it away, they turn it off, and they do some things that are non-digital.
Exactly, like going outside and playing even when you are a teenager.
What we know is that people are most creative not when they're on a device, but when they're simply walking or having a conversation like you and I are doing.
Thank you so much.
You are
really
welcome.
appreciate it. And you're online, you're on Twitter, you're on Facebook if people have more questions for you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Gigi. And for more information, if you missed any of her tips, you can catch them on our website, cbsnewyork.com, and we'll be right back.